If I was the enemy, I might sabotage your recovery by telling you a lie that says that if you get honest, honesty as a whole will destroy you. The enemy can be deceiving and feed us with lies like that. And today we're going to talk about the importance of understanding the enemy's schemes and his role in trying to sabotage our recovery in those lies that honesty will destroy us. Welcome to Celebrate Recovery Official, a podcast that shares life-change stories, courage, hope, and leadership wisdom, all centered around the Celebrate Recovery principles based on Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus gives us tools to face our hurts, our hang-ups, the lies that we may be believing about God, ourselves, and others, and even our circumstances. And it can lead to some unhealthy coping strategies or defenses, protections we call habits that hurt our fellowship with the Lord and connection with the community around us. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol and perfectionism. My name is Rodney. I'm the Global Field Director with Celebrate Recovery. It's good to be back with you today. I hope you've been enjoying this new series as we're trying to tackle some of those talks and discussions and topics around how the enemy might sabotage our recovery. And today we're going to unpack the important topic of the enemy's lies that he would try to sabotage our recovery, saying that if we're honest, it will destroy us. So I'm excited to jump into this conversation with you today. Got a couple brothers here joining me. I want you guys to introduce yourself and we'll jump in here.
Yeah. Hey, y'all. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. I struggle with anxiety and depression, sexual addiction, and grief. And my name is Andy.
Hey, Andy.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. I struggle with anxiety, depression, food binging, and alcohol. My name's Hudson.
Hey, Hudson. Let me jump in here. So right out of the gate, just when you hear that, just thinking about our own hearts, our own stories in the space, what comes to the surface? If the enemy wants to sabotage my recovery, he'll tell me that honesty will destroy me. Thoughts that come to mind with that?
Man, well, I know for me, it feels like that whole idea was the biggest thing that I was struggling with whenever I first came into Celebrate Recovery. I still remember part of my story is I got hired into recovery. And I remember, Rodney, when you knocked on my door and you said, "Hey, man, I'm getting ready to start a step study that I'll be leading. I think it'd be great if you jumped into it." I was like, "Yeah, sure, that'd be awesome." And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, man, I'm going to get fired in
because
3 weeks.
Might have to be honest. And
Yeah,
okay.
Because what you didn't know at the time was I had been hiding my pornography addiction that I'd been holding on to my entire life. And there was also a lot of other poor choices that I had made that they were kind of these skeletons in my closet that I'm like, man, these are secrets I'm going to take to my grave and I have every intention of doing. But now I'm being forced with this place where I got to be honest.
Yeah.
And part of me really wanted it. And part of me was just scared to death.
Yeah. So fear does become a component. It reminds me that if you see, so we build this facade, we put this mask out to the world. I want you to love this version of me. And so we try to kind of polish this false version of ourselves. But meanwhile, this inside, this hidden part, I call those the scary parts of my heart, are dying a slow death, right? I'd rather you love this false version than see the true self, because if you see this, I'm going to have to be honest about why it's there and what's there and all that stuff. But if you see that, I could lose my job, could be one of those things, or you may go away from me. You may find me to be too much, might be one of those things. Hudson, what about you, man? What's that look like in your life, man?
Yeah, it just makes me think of my story. So, I'm a pastor's kid, and I was kind of during my heavy alcoholism, I was actually working at our church back home as the maintenance guy, and kind of a little catch-all. I did a little bit of everything, but I just remember being so afraid of if I was honest and told my dad what was going on, told the other staff, my family, that for one thing I would get fired from the church, and that it would be, just from a young age I was taught we got to protect the family name because we're ministers of the community, and so I was just petrified of what being honest would do to my life. And when I finally was honest, I did get fired, but
oh, great.
Yeah, but it couldn't have been a better thing for me. So I went from being fired from the church, went to work for State Farm, and turns out the guy that was my boss was a former alcoholic, and we ended up forming this really close bond together. And it's just incredible how from that moment of deciding to be honest, dealing with that pain, it doesn't mean that it wasn't still good, and it turned out good, like the Lord says. But it was not easy.
Yeah.
It was a process. It took a while, and at the time I couldn't see what it was going to turn into, but looking back now, I could truly say it was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I know somebody listening may be thinking, see, I told you that my biggest fear could come true, and why would I want to do that? And so it doesn't always happen that way, but it could happen that way. And I think it's just a good reminder in that scenario, and then we'll turn the corner, is this: God loves you too much to not pursue you in that space. And if there is something that's blocking you, right, maybe he knew that as long as you stay in this scenario, I'm not going to have your full heart. I need to get your full attention. And so there's this death of that, maybe an idol, right, that needs to happen in that space. And so I loved you just kind of articulating that was actually the best thing for me, right? But it's scary in the moment. It's scary to face that. Why would I want to do that? Yeah.
Well, I think to that question right there of like, man, why in the world would I want to do that? One of the things that I had to realize is that there's such greater consequences of staying hidden. You talked about wearing a mask, and man, I got so good at wearing a mask in my life. And I remember hearing this from you, actually, I think probably in that first step study, man, was the more that I live with a mask plastered on in my life, I can get real good at that.
Yeah.
And I can make people see whatever they want to see. But when I do that, and I do it well, the love and the affirmation and the connection that I'm longing for, it goes to the mask, not the person behind the mask. And what I realized for me is that the more that I put out this facade that I was put together, the more that people bought it, the worse I felt about myself.
Yeah.
The more like a fraud I felt, and it just felt like I was living in this prison.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to note that, we're building our life based on lies, right? And so then it becomes this, it's exhausting, right? We talk about denial, energy lost. Denial of truth does completely zap us. And so I speak this lie to this group, to this person, and then this lie. And then I'm trying to keep up and organize my file cabinet of, wait, where am I in my lies? And what did I tell you? And then when it starts to bleed over, that statement we say in recovery often, we're only as sick as our secrets. And honesty, the opposite of honesty is secrecy and misery.
Yeah.
We're just stuck in that space.
Well, you mentioned keeping the file cabinet straight. I mean, there literally was a point in my life in college. This was after I'd started, serving with a college ministry where I went to college. And so I had this image that I was portraying and this kind of leadership space that I was in. But that was only on Monday nights. Saturday nights, I was a totally different person. And the college I went to was small. And so there was this thing where I'm just like, oh man, I would get nervous just going into the cafeteria being like, okay, I know that that group of friends from this context, and they have no idea who I am in this context. And it was exhausting.
Yeah.
It was absolutely exhausting.
Wow. Yeah. Thoughts, Hudson, on that?
Well, I was just thinking about just how incredibly lonely it was. Just incredibly lonely in the sense of I have a mask out and that's the only thing getting attention, like Andy was saying. And couldn't go out, and have that party experience because everybody knew me.
Yeah.
So it was just I had to hide all the time.
Yeah.
And until I was honest and came out of that, I didn't have a friend in life. I didn't have anybody I could talk to. I didn't have anybody because I was so afraid of what honesty might do.
Yeah.
That it kept me isolated and alone, and looking back, fed my addiction more than anything.
Well, and so the longer I'm in this facade, the more I'm disconnecting fellowship with God, because he needs our true self, our true honesty, which then means I go to these other strategies. If I'm not able to go to God in fellowship, I go to these other things. And I see this often with couples that may be in an affair conversation, right? So one has been keeping a secret, living this double life, and they finally bring it to the surface. And it's fascinating that there's a sense of relief for the sharer. I've been carrying that. I'm so glad that it's finally out. And there's a temptation to be like, all right, now let's just go live our life. Aren't you glad this is out? And the other person on the other end is going, oh my gosh, your honesty was needed to be able to have any chance for this. But this is new information for me, right? So the sharer, and the reason I bring that up is it does speak to the release in the pressure in our heart, our mind, our body, when we do finally get honest. That as one brother said, that when I started getting into recovery and getting honest about myself and what I was doing, then I was able to lay my head on my pillow at night and sleep like I've never slept before in my life. There's just this peace that comes with it, right?
Yeah, there really is. Man, I'll never forget. We're kind of in principle 4, step 4 in the middle of our lessons on Friday nights, and it reminds me of that first step study, actually sharing my inventory with my sponsor, and which is step 5, and it's not step 4, but regardless,
you're sharing step 4.
I was sharing step 4. But as I remember stepping into that meeting with him, knowing the things I wrote down, knowing that I had never shared them in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, am I really going to do this? And because I was convinced, and this was, 6-8 months into our group, I knew it was safe, but there was still this part of like, all right, I'm going to share this with my sponsor. And at the end, he's going to go, okay, thanks for sharing.
Get out.
Or, hey, I'm going to step in the hallway and give Rodney a call.
Yeah.
And,
calling. Yeah.
And when he looked at me and he goes, man, thanks for sharing. And he goes, there is nothing in here that has disqualified you from God's love, and I actually feel closer to you.
Yeah.
I was convinced that honesty, on the other side of honesty, was going to be more isolation. But on the other side of honesty, even though it was hard, ultimately it was actually everything that I ever wanted.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Yeah, thanks for being vulnerable with that. Yeah, I think in that picture of another person saying that, just expressing that love, multiply that by a very high number. I don't even know, but that's what God feels, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I don't think, and I've heard someone say, I don't think I could love you any more than I do in this very moment, right? And that's God's posture in that. That's the beauty of grace and mercy that, and that's the art of confession. You're talking about fifth step and confessing to God and to someone we trust. It's just coming into agreement with what God already knows. And he's just saying, I just need you to own this, and taking responsibilities a part of that. But this is cool to think about. What is God thinking? If you're getting that response from your sponsor, how much more is God saying, I love you, and I don't think I've loved you any more than I do in this very moment, because I'm getting the authentic self. I've already known about all the stuff that you're about to share and have shared, but I don't think I could love you anymore in that space. Pretty cool picture to think about. Well, I want to take a super quick break. When we come back, I want to just unpack when we say get honest and honesty, what are we getting honest about? Right? We kind of tend to go to the bad things that we've done. But I'd love to lean into that, get y'all's insight on what are we getting honest about and what's the value of honesty in that space. So take a super quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation of how the enemy can sabotage our recovery by feeding this lie that honesty, if we're honest, it will destroy us. Stick with us and we'll be right back. Hey friends, if you're looking for another meeting, we have an online meeting every single Wednesday at noon Pacific. People from all over the world come together and we have a little mini-moni, a testimony, a short version of a testimony and or a devotional. And then we break up into gender-specific groups. You can share or just listen with men and women in gender-specific groups and allow God to work through you to give yourself an extra meeting. If you'd like more information, go to celebraterecovery.com and join us this Wednesday, noon Pacific. Hope to see you there. Welcome back. So loving this conversation, talking with Andy and Hudson here on the local level, our ministry. Great teammates in this ministry, do so many good things. But so right before break, we kind of set the T on this, that when we talk about honesty, the enemy will sabotage my recovery by telling me that honesty will destroy me. We know that honesty actually brings health and recovery. What do we mean? What are we getting honest about? What are some of the things that come to mind to your heart in that space?
Yeah, I was just thinking about being honest about where you're really at. I know we say it all the time, but truly believing it's okay to not be okay. That was really difficult for me because I was taught that to be a man, you need to be strong. You know, you need to not be emotional, and you just needed to do your stuff and get it done and suck it up, you know. And it's just, that was how you pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, keep going, you know, and you don't have time to feel that. And it couldn't have been further from the truth until I was willing to be honest about where I really was at. I couldn't grow. I was stuck there. I stagnated there because of I wasn't working from where I was really coming from.
Yeah. So let me lean into that. Acknowledging where I'm at, right? Kind of dissect that a little bit. What does that mean? Where you're at? I'm sitting in this chair, right? Just for our listeners, what does that mean when you say acknowledging where I actually am right now?
I think you can think about what is my mental state.
Yeah.
For me, anxiety is a big struggle for me. And so a good way that I found to do that has actually been talking to a counselor, sharing them about my thought life. What am I actually thinking about? Because I never think about what I'm thinking about. Yeah. That's been a learning experience for me. And just bouncing it off of him, somebody I trust. And then he helped me to kind of give me a kind of a baseline of where I was really at. And that helped a lot. Just mentally, what are your thoughts? What are you coping with? Like, what are the things that you're going to? When I quit drinking, food has been a major thing that I would go to if I'm stressed, if I'm tired, if I'm bored. Yeah. Like, what am I going to in those situations?
That's good.
And so that maybe be a couple things to think about.
I love it. Andy, what about you, man?
Yeah. I remember it was so helpful being in like open share and step study and connecting with my sponsor. And I remember having these epiphanies where it was like, oh, my addiction isn't just happening just out in in a vacuum. There's actually other things that are driving it. it's these things called my feelings and emotions and longings and desires. And my sponsor told me, he goes, man, anytime that we're acting out, it's our emotions coming out sideways. And so for me, being honest with where I was at, it had to start with me reconnecting to my own heart, which, Hudson, I resonate with kind of those ideas of upbringing, because even that idea of like understanding my emotional state in the moment and starting to understand where I'm at, that felt like an act of weakness for me. That felt like me going, golly, I can't just tough it through and understand it. But as I listened to other guys share, and as I started working through the process myself, I started understanding that like me trying to just kind of power through was the thing that was causing me to spin out. And so I had to be honest with myself of like, oh, sometimes when I'm in conversations with people, there's an internal dialogue because I feel like I'm failing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I have this thing called anxiety that pops up when I feel like others are seeing through that mask.
Yeah.
And
Well, and both you brought up anxiety, and I just want to lean into that just through this lens of how the enemy will tell us if we're honest about our anxiety, it will destroy me. Just kind of really kind of going a layer deep on that. So how does the enemy feed that lie for you on if I talk about my anxiety, for example, just one example, what is the lie that and how that would destroy you?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how as like my shame kept me from being honest, but as I started being more honest, I felt more shame about the thing I was being honest about. And so I feel anxiety, and my first thought is, why am I feeling anxious? What's going on there? And the fear is like, I'm portraying this mask that says I have it all together, or I'm competent in one way or another. And I feel that mask starting to get pierced. And I'm going to be honest about the fact that I feel like it's getting pierced, which means that it's starting to kind of allow this house of cards that I've built to start to fall. But leaning into the anxiety, I already fear that people think that I'm less than. And now I'm going to confirm that. Because ultimately there was this idea that in one way, shape, or form, and I didn't have this language initially, but I've got to have some level of togetherness. I've got to have some level of perhaps perfection in my life.
That's good. What about you, man?
Yeah, I was just thinking it's more anxiety would be a fear of exposure for me. And kind of going off what Andy said, but just thinking of a good example would be with my wife in particular. You know, like, all right, what if I'm anxious about X, Y, and Z, then that means that I'm weak and that she can't trust me to take care of her. So I can't let her into that, or she'll think I'm weak. Her opinion of me will change. So that's a huge part of, and that doesn't just happen with my wife. That's just an example, but just like if people realize how afraid I am of doing simple, easy things to what it seems like to most people. Like the fear is like, man, that dude really is jacked up. Like maybe we shouldn't give him a shot, or maybe I can't trust him to take care of what needs to be taken care of.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so I think I kind of lean more on the internal. Obviously, external is a fear. The external will destroy me. What will you think of me? You'll think less of me. But I'm just thinking about just that narrative of if I allow anxiety in the room and I get honest, it's going to get worse, right?
Yeah.
This could become bigger than I can manage. And so a lot of times we see people do that where I feel anxiety, so run away from the anxiety so that it can't get me. When it's not trying to get me, it's just trying to tell me something. But my fear is if I feel and let that into the room, it's going to get worse, which is why we'll see panic attacks a lot of times as we we try to shove it down, and our body finally says, if you're not going to get honest with me and listen to me, I'm really going to get your attention. And so it is a signal, and I'm just thinking about how that, not being honest with my anxiety, for example, there's just one example, how that can get worse. But it kind of goes back to what you were talking about, being honest about where I am, even to learn how the emotional intelligence honesty factor. I feel sad. I just talked about this and it makes me feel sad. It makes me feel lonely. That's kind of a foreign language for people coming into recovery sometimes because they've been trained, to your point when we've talked about this. I learned at a young age that it's bad to be honest about those emotions. It's bad to be honest about my pain. Suck it up, stop your crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. So we learn strategy that says lie about what you're feeling, just put on a happy face, and doesn't say blessed are the happy. No, it doesn't say that. The pure in heart, and that pure in heart in step 4 that you were talking about is that principle 4 is be honest about what I'm feeling. But some of those play into why we would not be honest, and the enemy uses that to sabotage, doesn't he?
Yeah, he absolutely does. Yeah, there's been times and places in my life where me getting up the courage to be honest about what's going on, I feel anxious because I feel sad because I'm upset about something. And, I don't know if you guys have ever struggled with this, but sometimes when I have emotions that I don't know how to articulate, they build up and get so strong that they kind of come out in a strong way.
Mm-hmm. There's anger.
There's anger.
Yeah.
There's energy behind it. And anytime that would come out fairly often as a kid, it actually led to more disconnection. I'm bringing this up because I can't hold it down anymore, and I need you to see me in this. Can you just understand where I'm at in it?
Yeah.
And it went sideways.
Yeah.
And so what do I learn in those places? It's like, okay, I didn't say that right.
Yeah.
Maybe I do this better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's been the value for you guys in being honest? If somebody's listening and they're believing that lie that, being honest will destroy you. Your testimonies, what's been the fruit of honesty, and how did that combat that lie that the enemy threw at you guys?
Yeah, so I like what you say, Rodney, is pain won't last forever, but it'll wait forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that truly, I remember sharing my inventory with Andy. And, I just wrote I'm doing my life change story tomorrow. And I just wrote in it, I never knew what I was carrying until I let it go. And I really didn't feel it until a few weeks after that. I just felt lighter. I just felt like I could move through life, and there was a confidence in somebody really knows me. Somebody really knows me, and they chose to love me anyway. And so just seeing that in Andy's face when I shared that with him, that he still loved me, he didn't bat an eye.
Yeah.
He's like, well, that was it. I'm just kidding.
That's all you got.
Yeah. But just he loved me well.
Yeah.
In that. And
I love that.
I just a confidence has grown in me that I've never had in my life.
What about you, Andy? What's the fruit of that?
Man, I think there's been such a relief that I don't have to keep living in hiding.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived in that space for so long, and it was so lonely. There was so much anxiety. There was so much fear. There was so much, just so much disconnection. Honesty for me has, kind of in a similar way that Hudson was saying, it's allowed me to know, like, okay, some people, a lot of people at this point, know the worst parts of me.
Mm-hmm.
And they still talk to me.
They didn't go away.
They didn't go away,
Yeah.
but actually they got closer.
Yeah.
And it's given me a lot more confidence to be able to go, hey, maybe I don't have to live with these things that I've been allowing myself to be weighed down.
Yeah.
And maybe the close friendships that I've longed for my entire life, maybe they actually are able for me to have it, have those. And it's not just that I'm defective and nobody wants me, but it's maybe I can learn to let people in.
Yeah, I love it. It reminds me, I mean, when we talk about pain, I think it was Dallas Willard that says that the reality is just what is. Pain is what happens when we bump into reality. And it's just coming to that realization. It reminds me of that old recovery phrase that if you come to that realization you can't get out of it, get into it. I can't get out of this, so I'm going to get into it. And honesty is just saying, all right, I can't get out of this. It is what it is. I'm feeling pain. There's a risk of feeling more pain. But what's the cost if I don't take the risk of some of the consequences? The greatest consequence, we talk about that pain is inevitable, misery is optional. The greatest consequence is I stay in this stuck, sick place. And that's a miserable place. And honesty, confessing with our hearts to God, to someone else, and to ourselves, to be real and honest. And honesty is just a big part of recovery. And if we're not honest, we can't fully experience the fruit of recovery. So, man, guys, great conversation. Thank you guys both for sharing your hearts and your wisdom. And it means a lot for you to be vulnerable with us today. I know you blessed our listeners. So love you guys.
Love you too, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I hope that gives you some thought, some food for thought. You know, this enemy, there's a reason the scriptures say that he seeks to kill, steal, and destroy. And sometimes he tries to feed us with these nasty lies that take us away from the proven and effective principles that have led to life in our recovery, that have led to a space of being able to celebrate our recovery. If you're struggling with being honest and maybe the enemy's feeding you with some sabotage tools, don't face this alone. Come see us, push through it, and we'll recover. We'll celebrate our recovery together. Hey, thanks so much for being with me today. I pray that you join me next time. Until then, God bless you guys.